Okay, so we're going live on YouTube now. I'll let you just start, Judy, with your story, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you, Anne, and thank you to the people that have shown up to hear me. So I stumbled across the principles in 2016, and at that point I was absolutely at rock bottom, and I had a long history of mental illness, depression, anxiety, suicidal thinking for, I'm guessing, most of my life. Actually, when I look back on it, I wasn't diagnosed until my early 20s, but I actually had it way before that. In fact, I look back and wonder, how did I actually make it through? Except, of course, I know my wisdom was always there for me, even when I had no clue. And that was actually demonstrated about 10 years before I came across the principles. It was probably my second worst ever time, and I was desperately debating, would my kids be better off with or without me? And in that state of mind, I honestly believed they'd be better off without me. And I knew exactly what I was going to do. I had my plan. I was still debating that question somewhat, but I was pretty far gone. And then it suddenly occurred to me that if I went ahead with my plan, my kids would have to walk home from school. I normally pick them up. But worse than that, they would find me dead. And that was abhorrent. I couldn't have that. So that was quickly followed by the next thought, which was, no matter how bad it gets, you're not allowed to commit suicide. Or actually, there was a thought in between. It was, I didn't want my kids to ever look back and think, she didn't love me enough to stick around. And the next one, no matter how bad it is, you're not allowed. And so suicide was off the table, and I lived in misery for 10 years, in and out of depression. I was on all sorts of medications. I saw psychiatrists, psychologists. I had CBT, all sorts of different therapies. And sometimes it would seem to help for a while, and then it wouldn't. I'd fall over again. And I'd pretty much lost all hope, because when I'd first been put on, well, I tried various medications, but I did find one that was quite good for my anxiety. But I would always kind of fall over again and really get bad. And so they'd increase the dose. And at one point I was taking 5 times what had initially seemed helpful. And of course, with that came, oh my God, what will happen when they can't increase it anymore? What will happen when, and so I just had so much thinking constantly. So back to 2016, I thought I had reasons for my current depression. My mum had passed away with cancer. My dad now had cancer. And then my daughter had a fall off her horse, resulting in a head injury. I sort of got through all that. And then something else happened. A couple of people that I thought were friends just completely stabbed me in the back. And that was like the final straw. And so here I am, desperately unwell, but knowing that I can't commit suicide. And I had no hope in terms of going back to the doctor, because it really had never done that much good. So I'm Googling at 3 a.m. in the morning, how to commit suicide so that nobody knows you've done it. And in that state of mind, I thought, well, if I could find a way that they didn't have to know, that would be acceptable, that would be okay. And I guess I'm kind of lucky that I didn't find anything. And I eventually, after probably 2 or 3 hours, I just went back to bed exhausted after crying and my Google search. And the next day, I sort of dragged myself out of bed, as you do. And it was my habit to make myself go and work in the garden. And I see now that that was my wisdom coming through too, because I would listen to things on the internet while I was working in the garden, and I found that if I was listening to something else, I didn't have to listen to me. So of course my thinking would settle down, and I'd be doing something physical, and inevitably, as hard as it was to make myself get started, it was just as hard to stop, because I'd be starting to feel a little bit better until I went away and got in my head again, at least. On this day, I'm listening to something, I've no idea what I selected, and it finished, and the autoplay on YouTube started playing something else, and it was Michael Neal. And I remember being so skeptical. I'm like, oh, what's this? Yeah, it sounds like advertising for something. And I'm actually sure it was advertising, probably for Super Coach, because he was interviewing these people that had done the program, and they were talking about this thing I'd never heard of called the principles. And as I say, I was skeptical. It sounded like, there was something to be sold. And I'd never heard of this thing. And I thought I knew a lot because, I'd been studying self-development for probably the best part of 20 years by that stage, actually probably much longer. And I'd never heard of this 3 principles thing. And frankly, I actually would have changed it, except there was a reason. I think I was either too far away from the computer or my hands were dirty. There was a reason I couldn't. And so somewhat frustrated, I was stuck listening. And thank goodness for that. Thank you, mind. I heard enough to get curious. It was, what was this thing they were talking about? And I went away and I started to research it. And I was really lucky because early on I stumbled across Dr. Bill Pettit in an interview with Judy, and they were talking about this girl, Nicole. And Nicole had, the interview is actually on the doctorspetits.com on his website. And Nicole was somebody that had suffered a absolutely horrific kidnapping and rape, and she'd been in and out of mental hospitals for, I think it was about 7 years, and she'd had numerous suicide attempts. And Bill told the story of how he'd happened to come across her, and it was a day when he was dropping off some Sid Banks books at the hospital, and she was at the nurse's stand berating them. Why won't you just let me kill myself? And apparently he said something like, and I won't get this completely right, but the gist of it will be there. But he said something like, you don't have to be bothered by what happened in the past, or something like that. And she railed on him and just yelled and screamed at him, you don't know what happened to me, and just let him have it. And he just listened. And then at the end of it, he said, you're right. I don't know what happened to you, but I'm right too. And it was enough, it gave her a bit of a start. And apparently she turned to the nurses as he walked away, who's that man? I want to work with him. And she did. And she actually made a full recovery to the point that she was now teaching the principles. And so hearing that story really early on, it was like, oh my goodness, if it can help somebody like that, of course it should be able to help me. And I was also really lucky too that Bill around that stage was doing all those live webinars with the Real Change. And I was actually able to attend many of them live, and it was free. So it was wonderful. And I just think I was so lucky that I stumbled across the principles. And thank goodness, because, I often, well, not often, I sometimes ponder, what would have happened if I hadn't? From previous experience, I had always sort of seen my way through it. So, but I definitely, understanding the principles, I now experience levels of peace and love and joy that I just couldn't even have imagined prior to the principles. Life was sort of okay. When good things happened, I felt good. When bad things happened, I felt really bad. And now it's kind of like, well, I still experience the full gamut of emotions, but it's like Linda Pransky says, you can have your experience without your experience having you. There's a lot more of that where I can just it's almost like sitting back and watching myself and thinking, you're okay. And very, very quickly it turned around. My anxiety, which prior to coming across the principles it was actually like having car sickness pretty much 24/7. It was constant. It was so bad. And I'd actually lost 10 kg in the space of I think it was about 6 weeks after Melissa had her fall. And, I literally had to make myself eat. I really was in pretty bad shape. I guess I wouldn't have been Googling how to commit suicide if I hadn't been. But that changed really quickly. And I found that, I might sometimes still get a bit anxious, but it would often come with, oh, I must be having some anxious thinking. And I'd just sort of let it go and see what happened. I was, for a while, I still would get disturbed sometimes when I had suicidal thoughts, because I hadn't really, sometimes they would be a bit upsetting. But then I heard Dr. Bill talking one day, and he talked about how they actually were your friend. They were like the rumble strips on the side of the road. They were your warning sign that actually your thinking was a bit stirred up. And there wasn't anything to do. It was just wait and see, knowing that in any moment you could have fresh thinking and feel completely different. And that certainly was a lot more hopeful than anything I'd ever had prior to that.
So what was it about the principles what did you see in the principles that had that effect on you, do you think?
I think, first of all, it was just the hope side of it. People that they weren't just getting by, they'd actually made amazing recoveries.
Mm-hmm.
And people, like Nicole, who had seen the absolute top people in the field and hadn't had any success, but now with this new understanding, she was. And it was something completely different. And I loved the way that they were speaking to wellness, not looking at the behaviours and the symptoms, but actually looking beyond that for addressing the root cause of it all. And if you listen to Bill Pettit, he's very clear that nobody's broken, we're not damaged. I'd basically been told I'd need to be on medication for the rest of my life. And I hated it. I hated the side effects. I hated feeling like a zombie. And to be honest, there were times when I still felt in absolute despair anyway. So what was the point? And I have to admit, I was a bit stubborn in terms of wanting to get off medication. I guess maybe I was a bit vain about it too, because I gained weight when I was on medication. I just wanted to be free, and I couldn't. It really has offered me freedom that I certainly never had before.
And for people who have never heard of the principles, how have the principles offered you freedom, would you say?
I started to play with it a little bit and just experiment. And one of the things I very quickly learned was that the more comfortable I was being uncomfortable, as in not worried about it, not trying to change it, not trying to analyze my way to feeling better, the more quickly I would feel better. And that was so different to everything I'd ever been taught, because I'd done the old go in and try and work out what you're feeling, and I started to see how much easier life was when you didn't have a lot of thinking on your mind. So a really good example for me was, we had a bunch of horses, and with Melissa being injured, I had to take over the workload. So I suddenly had an extra 4 hours work a day. And sometimes that came with a lot of thinking. I shouldn't have to do this. This is Melissa's job. It's not fair. And I very quickly learned that if I went out and did it in that mindset, it was jolly hard work. It was like walking through thick mud. It was heavy and effortful. And I actually discovered it by accident, because I often was in that kind of thinking around that time. And then one day my son happened to pop in and visit, but I needed to rush out and feed the horses. And of course, I wanted to be back as quickly as possible. And I was so looking forward to catching up with my son that I just rushed out and did it. And lo and behold, I found it took me a third less time. And it was so easy. It was like, oh my goodness, look what you normally do to yourself. And you don't have to see that very often for it to have a massive impact. And so I'd start to be more aware of when I was getting caught up in unnecessary thinking that was basically weighing me down versus just doing stuff. And the other thing that was really, really great was that I would notice that behaviors had just fallen away without me consciously having to do anything. A classic example of that was that I used to be really, really hard on myself. I think that came from wanting to be better and thinking, well, if I would just be hard enough on myself, I wouldn't make the same mistake next time. And that seems logical and like a good plan if you want to actually strive and be better. But I see now that it just doesn't work that way. All it does is make you miserable. It doesn't make you less likely to make the same mistake again. So on this day, I'm going out to feed the horses, and I'd driven to the far end of our farm, which is not huge. We only have about 50 acres. But I'd got there and somehow I'd forgotten to put the buckets on the trailer. So I drove back to the barn and I picked them up and I went back and I fed the horses. And it wasn't until after I'd fed the horses that I suddenly realized how easy that was. Because normally in the past, I would have been yelling and screaming at myself in my head, "You useless." I would have actually been quite abusive. And that was the way I lived. I was really abusive to myself. And I would never treat someone else the way I treated myself. And on this day, I just didn't do it. I didn't consciously decide not to do it. I just didn't do it. And I noticed the difference. And that was just so amazing. Like, oh my God, life becomes so much easier. And then the other thing that happened that actually was quite pivotal, actually, because I sort of see, like, for a while I was kind of scared by my suicide thoughts. It'd kind of be, I'm going downhill a bit, otherwise I wouldn't be having these. And then on this particular day, again, often things seem to happen when I'm heading out to feed the horses. It's amazing. But I was heading out to feed and I suddenly had this thought. My birthday was coming up in a couple of weeks, and this thought came into my mind. I know my birthday present to myself could be to commit suicide. And that kind of had me, what? Where did that come from? And I must have been I was in an okay state of mind. It was kind of like, what? Where? This is weird. And it was a really good example of, we don't choose the thoughts that pop into our head. They just arrive, oftentimes. And it was so funny because I happened to be telling it to a Three Principles friend, Craig Wyman, actually from Australia. And he actually said to me, "Gosh, you're really creative, aren't you?" And I'd never thought of it from that point of view before. It's like, wow, that's a totally different take on it. And I think it was then that I actually really started to see that, we don't have any control. But we do kind of have control about whether we want to jump on board and play with the thoughts. I think most of the time. And I see now that, those suicide thoughts, the rumble strips, I always see them. I always kind of know what I'm doing to myself, but it hasn't always steered me back onto the path of stop doing it. And now I'm kind of see that, well, actually, that's a choice point that I have a lot of the time. And I can choose to just stop it. Just don't. I sort of likened it to, it's like the thought arrives and if I jump on board, it's like jumping on a wild horse and I can get carted anywhere. And I'm just along for the ride. But I don't actually have to jump on the horse. I can just have it sit beside me and not, other people would, describe that in a different way. But for me, that's kind of helpful to know that I just don't have to. And I think what was also pivotal at that time when I was talking to Craig and telling him about it, I was really calm. Like I'd fallen into this state where I was talking about all the stuff that would normally really bother me and it just didn't. And that was a way to, I started to see that there really wasn't a problem unless I thought there was. And I just started to be less worried about everything.
And I notice you're not talking about doing anything to change your thinking. You're just noticing that the thoughts are there.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah,
no,
definitely.
yeah, which
Just
sounds a
being
lot.
aware.
Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, just being aware of them and starting to see that it just doesn't really matter. And starting to take myself a whole lot less seriously. You know, knowing that the thoughts are there. And also, I think it was Amy Johnson's book I read. She talked about how the intensity of feeling, to me, it's kind of, if it's really intense and powerful, to me, that's my warning sign that that's thinking I shouldn't be paying any attention to.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like that orange light warning sign or red light. No, don't take any notice of that. And I think, the thing I still have to remind myself sometimes, because it can really look like you're thinking about a particular problem and it's urgent and compelling. And sometimes I just have to remind myself, no, it's not telling me anything about the situation or the person. It's just telling me that I've got stirred up thinking. It's, never about what we think it's about. And, it's easy to forget that sometimes when you are a bit caught up. And, I still get caught up. I'd be, I'm still human. Sometimes I'm more human than I'd like to be. But it's actually all okay. It's actually not a problem, and we're the ones that make it a problem by adding the meaning.
Well, that's what we're here for, to have a human experience, isn't it? So you can't be wrong. It's just an experience. As long as you, as you say, you just see it as that. Once you see that none of it's real and you don't have to take any notice of it, it makes a big difference. And I think when I first got to know you was around the time, not long after your daughter had the accident, and you were struggling with the horses and all, and it's so, to see you now is really different, how.
Yeah, absolutely. I often joke to people it's the best facelift on the planet because when you can actually, I'm the sort of person you can see it on my face, like literally. And I used to have massive frown lines between my eyebrows. And I think I constantly went around in a bit of a scowl. And I had no idea. Like, I was so serious. Everything was hard work. I just was trying too hard. And now, for the most part, I take myself so much more lightly. And although in saying that, there's still trigger points. There's still times when I seem to get triggered out of all proportion to what's happening. And I see that when massive things happen, and I've actually had some pretty massive things happen, and I seem to cope with them beautifully. It's like my thinking just all completely falls away, and I just know what to do. I know what to say, and it might sound a bit strange, but it feels like the thoughts come through me, the words come through me. They're not actually coming from me in those moments. I just know what to do. And yet I'll still find myself get triggered by some random comment that my husband might make. It seems to me that, my husband and my daughter are the two primary things that I still struggle with a little bit. But with everything else, I'm actually pretty good. Leading into this, I had a full gamut of, I was excited, I was scared. I was actually really tired because it's been a big day. Like, for me, this is 8:30 at night in New Zealand. And I've been up probably since about 5 o'clock this morning because I woke up early and, it wasn't really worth going back. And I've had a big day. I've, been at things in town all day. So, when I came home, I was kind of like, all excited, a bit tired, scared. I'm not tired at all now. Right at the minute, I'd have to say I am a little bit anxious. But one of the things I've learned is that it just doesn't matter. And I don't take any notice of that anymore for the most part. There's still times that I do. I just so wish I would have learnt this, so much earlier, and that's why I'm keen to be involved in things like this, spreading the word to young people, because my life could have just been so much more fun and so much easier. And I mean, you still experience the tough times. Life is a roller coaster. It is ups and downs. Things happen. But it doesn't have to be as hard as we sometimes make it. And even little things like, people, society as a whole, we talk about how habits are hard to change and it takes a lot of work. And I've actually seen for myself that that's actually just not true. So a really good example of that is that most of my life I bit my fingernails, and occasionally I would try really hard to stop it. Like I grew them for my wedding. I was determined I was going to have nice natural nails for my wedding, and with a lot of effort I actually grew them. But then I would always fall back into biting them again. And I'd kind of given up on the idea that I was ever going to have nice fingernails. And it's so funny because I was stripping our floors here at home, and as I was doing it, I was listening to Michael Neal, my go-to. And he was sharing the story about a client who'd come back to him, and the client had said, "What did you do to me?" And Michael's like, "Well, what's going on for you?" And the client went on to explain that, he'd tried all his life to stop biting his nails, and suddenly he wasn't biting his nails anymore. And, what did he do? And Michael went on to explain that how, people develop behaviours because at some level they've made a decision that it makes them feel better. And it's a misattribution, really, that, they've put 2 and 2 together and they've come up with 10 because, clearly biting your fingernails doesn't actually make you feel better. In fact, I used to bite mine to the point where sometimes I couldn't do anything with my hands for days because they were so raw, and it always seemed okay that the next day it would be tenfold worse. And I wouldn't be able to do the dishes, for instance, because I couldn't put my hands in the hot water. It was pretty bad. And I didn't really think anything of it. I just carried on doing the floors. And it was actually several months later that I suddenly noticed, oh my God, I've got fingernails. I didn't make any effort or consciously try to do it. It just happened, and I noticed that it had happened. And to me, that's just an example of how easy and effortless it can be. And interestingly, the odd time I did actually catch myself biting my nails again, but often it would be a bit like that anxiety thought, oh, wow, I must be really stirred up to think that this could make a difference. And I never beat myself up about the fact that I'd done it again. I just got on with life again, and, I'd grow them again. And I guess that's the way it's been for me, that even if I do get really, really upset, I'm so much more hopeful, and I'm hopeful it could change in an instant, depending on my thinking. And it's not really on me. I don't go searching for that thought to change how I'm feeling, because I've seen that just stirs things up. It just keeps me stuck for longer. But I can just carry on about my day. And actually, one of the things I really wanted to say was that when I look back on my life, it really made sense what I'd actually done to myself with my thinking. And, what I see is that a body kind of reflects to us what's going on. And for me, it was trying to tell me to stop doing that, but I didn't understand what it was trying to tell me. So it would just shout louder and find another way. So, I had depression, and then I had anxiety, and I actually developed a thyroid disorder, which I'm sure, looking back on it, as a child, I'd had really severe eczema. I think this started way back. And of course, because I didn't know what the symptoms were trying to tell me, it just had to find another way to get my attention. And I suspect that was possibly the same with when I was on medication. I don't know, but, maybe because I was still doing all that stuff, still getting caught up in my thinking. And I mean, I analysed everything to death, like you just wouldn't believe. And yeah, it was just trying to tell me, stop it. And I'm better at that now.
That's Rochelle. I wanted to say how amazing you are, Judy, and you told your story so beautifully. Thank you so much. Yeah, I agree.
Oh, that's so kind,
Thanks,
Rochelle. The one thing I'll add is that one of the things for me when I first came across this was, yeah, I didn't have a lot of money to spend on coaching and things like that. And I wouldn't want money to ever get in someone's way. So if anyone is interested, by all means, reach out to me. I just love talking to people about this stuff. And, you know, and I feel so, so lucky that so many people like yourself, Anne, have helped me through the journey that I would be honoured to just give back to others as well.
Lovely, thank you. And Rochelle says that you're looking very calm and relaxed. Which you are.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really good to see you looking like that. It's very.
I actually surprise myself sometimes and because actually I must say, because I'm a person that really, really hated to talk in public. In fact, Anne will be able to say I only got my photo to her probably a couple of days ago because I hate having my photo taken. I hate being on video. I hate the sound of my voice. And I used to lisp. You know, when I started school at 5, I got teased about my lisp. So I decided it would be a good idea not to talk at all. And so I was really shy and anxious for so many years. And now I sort of see that I'm not shy at all. I sometimes get shy thinking. And when that happens now, I just kind of sit quietly and just wait because I know it will pass. And then I'll be back to this. And, you know, what I see now is that I just had life backwards. I was so busy listening to the thoughts that came with painful, intense feelings that I just completely dismissed the ones that came with easy feelings. I thought that while I might like them to be true, they really weren't because they didn't feel as important as the other ones. And I just had it, as I say, backward. And it's amazing because I totally missed some amazing insights that would have been really helpful for me if I would have just realized that actually it was an insight. Like, for instance, a good example was I remember actually saying to one of my therapists that, well, I didn't get worried about things that I thought about when I was asleep, when I was dreaming. Maybe the thoughts that came during the daytime weren't any more important than that. And I mean, nowadays I would think, oh my God, that's a massive insight. But I actually just let that one go. I just completely dismissed it because it looked like a nice idea, but it didn't look true because it didn't come with urgent and uncomfortable feeling. So I'll leave you on that note, maybe.
Well, that's really helpful for people to know that actually what they're looking for isn't that urgent feeling, because when we have when wisdom comes through, it doesn't come through with that urgent feeling, does it? It comes through very calmly and just matter of fact.
Yeah, exactly. And it took like it actually took really good people pointing out to me, oh, that's a really amazing insight. And I'd be kind of like, really? That's an insight? I was just so clueless. And as I say, I just had it completely backward.
Well, beautiful. Thank you very much. And
thank you, Anne.
That was lovely. And I'm sure that's going to help a lot of people listening to that and knowing the same as you were helped by listening to someone else telling their story. So that's lovely. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for everyone else being here. And we'll speak again very soon. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye.